Sonek had a rough transition into the intro of this video. And I, Soda Crab, had my own rough transition into playing Zero Gravity after the original Sonic Riders, because this game sucks and I hate it. Now, some of you are probably thinking, that title is a little bit harsh. In fact, I know a lot of you are, because feelings on this game don't tend to trend that far into the negative. And you know what? That's totally fair. This game isn't a complete broken mess like your Sonic 06s or your Sonic Booms. Simply controlling it isn't a nightmare like your Secret Rings or your Redacted. By all accounts, this game doesn't suck, and I shouldn't hate it. And yet, here I am, hating it. Because it sucks. While it may not be an abject failure of a video game, this game draws my ire because of its unique situation. It's all about the context, and that context is its status as the sequel to peak racing action, Sonic Riders. Now, I've already made a video about Sonic Riders, which you should definitely check out, because my opinion on that game greatly informs my opinion on this game. But to quickly summarize, Sonic Riders was a surprise banger when the Sonic franchise needed it the most. Everything about the game, from its aesthetic to its gameplay, was unique from Sonic's entire catalog, and from racing games as a whole. But while it did take a lot of risks and set itself apart, Sonic Riders didn't stumble in its uniqueness. Rather, it thrived in it, offering a racing experience with tons of depth and replayability. When I played it as a kid, the only thing I wanted from it was more of it. And lo and behold, more of it came less than 2 years later in early 2008 when Zero Gravity was released. Or at least it appeared to be more of it. It's actually kind of like if someone gave you a delicious animal-style double-double from an In-N-Out burger, then when you asked for another, that same person gave you a leftover McDonald's Quarter Pounder with cheese that had been sitting in the fridge for 3 whole days. The fact of the matter is that while Zero Gravity is indeed a sequel to Sonic Riders, it is by no means a proper follow-up to Sonic Riders. Zero Gravity is a strange game insofar as it looks like Sonic Riders, it sounds like Sonic Riders, and on the most surface of surface levels, it even plays like Sonic Riders, yet it feels incredibly alien and unsatisfying to anyone that has any level of appreciation for the original, like a fucked up homunculus made in the original's image, shambling around awkwardly in its shoes. Hey, how did this picture of Banana Mania get here? In this way, I think the best way to show off what is wrong with Zero Gravity is a step-by-step direct comparison with the original. And what better place to start than with what greets you the moment you boot up the game, the intro cutscene. Sonic Riders opens with this beautiful 2D animated cutscene in the style of the game's character artwork. It stands out beautifully from Sonic's usual CG openings. It gives off such a unique energy, with striking colors and lots of movements that could only work in a more stylized 2D look like this. Honestly, I have to say, in hindsight, Sonic Riders has one of my favorite video game openings ever. No other opening quite has that Sonic Riders feel, which makes it a perfect glimpse into the game's unique identity before you've even reached the menu. The Zero Gravity response to this is an overly long CG cutscene. Don't get me wrong, this looks great for a 2008 PS2/Wii game. However, the difference here is striking, and not in a way that looks good for Zero Gravity. Zero Gravity's intro doesn't tell you anything about this game outside of its basic story premise, which, for a racing game, isn't the most important thing in the world. If you're not going to have something like Sonic Riders intro that really sells the game's essence, I'd even rather have something like Mario Kart Double Dash's intro, which is just a gameplay reel set to some music, because at least that tells me something about what I'm about to play. In fact, this video does a good job of setting up Zero Gravity's basic story premise, because it's literally just the first cutscene of the campaign. Seriously, when you go and select story mode, this just plays again. Keep in mind, Riders also had a nice looking CG cutscene to begin its story mode, while still having that beautiful 2D intro. Essentially, this means that Zero Gravity doesn't really have an intro. They just threw the first cutscene here so something would play when you start up the game. The difference in first impression and energy levels here is absolutely insane. Before we've even pressed a button, Zero Gravity is already trailing in points behind the original. Zero Gravity's lack of aesthetic style doesn't stop at the intro though. Remember Sonic Rider's striking character art? Well, it's staying in your memory because here in Zero Gravity we get these fairly unimpressive 3D renders. Now, they're not bad, but considering how good the character art in the last game looked, these generic renders with white drop shadows just look kinda sad in comparison. And they look especially sad in-game, because while Ryder's artwork looked fantastic on its character select screen, for some reason in Zero Gravity, both the selection icons and renders of the characters are crunched down to a hilarious degree, where they look like amorphous blobs. In fact, all of the UI elements look really bad. I'm not quite sure how they managed to this thoroughly fuck up a menu, but it's pretty inexcusable. It's bad to the point of kind of being an obtuse eyesore. Credit where credit is due though. Once you get through the menus and you're in the gameplay or the cutscenes, Zero Gravity finally gets a visual leg up on its predecessor. It's because of this that I often hear people say that this game looks better than Riders. But to be 100% honest with you, I really don't give it much credit for this. Like, of course it looks better. It's made with reused assets. I would hope that in the almost 2-year development window between the original and Zero Gravity that they would step up the texture work a little bit. And it's not even like Riders was a bad looking game in the first place. I still think it looks fine, especially in motion. It's not like a minor graphical facelift was something it was in desperate need of that we should be heaping praise on Zero Gravity for. Okay, I've been pretty mean to Zero Gravity so far, so let me give it some credit. Not like just now where I gave it credit for looking better then immediately said that doesn't matter. I mean some real honest-to-God credit here. The other side of the presentation coin, the music, is outstanding in Zero Gravity. Honestly, I'd say it's a straight upgrade across the board. Riders had a great soundtrack that really vibes with its theming, but Zero Gravity takes it to a whole new level. Every single track in this game is a banger. The main gimmicks of this game even interact with the soundtrack, flipping between different layers of a song as you perform certain actions. Seriously, there is not a single even average song in this game. And I'm not even just talking the race tracks, I mean every song. Even the menu theme goes absolutely diabolically hard. That said, we've beaten around the bush with presentation long enough. It's time to discuss the meat and potatoes. The reason I actually don't like this game. The gameplay. Sure, the tracks may look good and they may sound fantastic, but even the best tracks in this game aren't as fun to play as the worst that Riders has to offer. That's mostly not the fault of the tracks themselves. They're really well themed, better themed than the original courses in my opinion. They'd probably all be a blast to play in Riders. The problem, though, is that they aren't in Riders, they're in Zero Gravity, where the gameplay is dumbed down, slow, clunky, and bad. I reiterate, it sucks, and I hate it. From the moment the race begins, things already feel off. If I was adjusting things from Sonic Riders, the starting line would not be on my list of things to change, but Zero Gravity goes the extra mile by not just changing it, but also making it feel worse for no reason. It's the same dynamic as the original. You time your running start to be as fast as possible and as soon as possible after the countdown. The difference here is that in Zero Gravity, it feels like you're wearing lead shoes. Your character's acceleration is just all wonky, it feels unnatural, and not just because I'm more used to the original. If it was just different, I'd question the logic behind even changing it, but it wouldn't be bad necessarily. But the fact that they changed it for the worse just baffles me. It's only the first 5 seconds of any given race, so it doesn't make a huge impact, but I'm noticing a pattern of Zero Gravity failing its first impressions. Things aren't much better once you cross the starting line, but before I can talk about why, I need to talk about this game's main gimmick, gravity. Gravity completely replaces air as the resource you have to manage in this game. Like air, it refills when you do tricks or perform specific actions like grinding, flying, and punching. Gravity is expended when doing two important mechanics, gravity control and gravity dive. Gravity control replaces drifting in this game. Instead of just sharply turning around a corner, you levitate your character in the air, slowing down drastically and angling yourself in the process, then rocketing off in the direction you're facing when you release the button. It's really awkward and kind of unintuitive at first. It takes some time to get used to it and to be able to use it effectively. There are specific designated sharp turns where you're meant to use it. It's unfortunately not very effective outside of these specific turns. Because of how much it slows you down, it's not worth using on any turns that aren't a sharp 90 or 180 degrees, but are still relatively sharp, ones where you would have still used the drift in Sonic Riders. For an example of what I mean, let's compare gravity control with Riders drift. On turns where you would hypothetically use gravity control in the original Riders, like this U-turn in Metal City, the drift performs the same function, making a sharp turn on a dime and providing a boost afterward, without grinding the game to a complete halt. Here, even though gravity control and the drift would both allow you to make this turn, I'd say the drift does a better job at it. But let's look at another example, the spiraling declines on Sky Road. Here, gravity control wouldn't work. It's a sharp turn, but it's not at an exact angle where you could stop, flip, and boost off in the other direction. The drift, on the other hand, works beautifully here. You can hug the inside wall all the way down and rocket off down the straightaway afterward. In the best of cases, gravity control is a worse alternative for the drift that provides the same function. In the worst of cases, as we see with Sky Road, gravity control actively limits Zero Gravity's track design by cutting out the ability to do sharp curves like this. The game is actively worse off because they felt the need to shoehorn in this weird mechanic in place of a basic racing game function. On the subject of weird and shoehorned gravity mechanics, the gravity dive is Zero Gravity's replacement for the boost. Essentially, you just hold down the button on certain designated straightaways, pausing in the air for a moment then flying straight forward, gaining extra speed and gravity for sliding off of environmental objects. This mechanic is so close to being cool, but it kind of ends up falling flat. Its utility is extremely limited on most parts of most tracks. 9 times out of 10, trying to use this thing outside of the one designated use gravity dive here straight away in each track will either get you off the track or bash you into a wall. Even if you manage not to careen off the shoulder, the utility gained from this move is probably minimal outside of its designated use cases anyways, since there's a significant pause before you rocket off with it. If you aren't flying for a substantial amount of time to make up for that pause, you're just wasting your gravity. By replacing the boost with this new function, now you aren't constantly trying to maintain your speed by boosting often and managing your air. You're only using your resources in very specific areas of the track where your resources are designed to be expended. It leaves very little room for the freedom and player expression that Riders lived and died by. This means that now you're left without much to do on long stretches of track in Zero Gravity except steer your board, which feels even worse than the same situation would in Riders, because even this game's basic steering functions are less snappy and responsive. Basically every second of gameplay in this game, except for maybe a slight dopamine rush you might get during the one gravity dive section, feels worse than its predecessor, but that's not the end of it. Indeed, Zero Gravity couldn't leave any feature alone. Everything had to be changed for the worse. They even had to ruin the simple progression of collecting rings to level up. This system was simple in Riders. At 30 and 60 rings, your board would level up, increasing your air supply and improving your gear's stats. It added to the core gameplay of managing your air. To be more effective, you had to expend air efficiently and optimally, and in order to do that, you would need more of it. Collecting rings was directly important to the central mechanic of air management. Zero Gravity throws all of this out the window for its stupid-ass gear change mechanic. Every board has 2 or 3 gears you can spend rings to switch between. The basic configuration that most boards have a permutation of is speed up, grind/fly/punch, and extra gravity point capacity. There are vehicles you can buy in the shop that already have the shortcut functions unlocked and some with different abilities altogether, but we're going to focus on the basic setting for simplicity's sake. Now, I've heard some people say that this gear change mechanic is an interesting decision for the player to make during gameplay because you can save up rings to purchase later levels earlier in the race if you want to, but I think that's complete and total horseshit. All this mechanic does, in my eyes, is just lock you out of fun shortcuts for the first lap or so of the race. The speed up costs 30 rings, the shortcut gear costs 50, and the GP increase costs 70. There's no real decision here. The character's shortcuts aren't so worth it that you wouldn't want to increase your board's base speed in a game where you can't boost on demand. And the GP boost is mostly superfluous, it barely matters. Absolutely no one is saving 70 rings for that shit before the other options. If you aren't in the front of the pack, you're just asking for everyone ahead of you to take all the rings. So 99% of the time, it's in your best interest to just take the speed boost immediately, then get your shortcuts, then get the GP boost if you want, I guess. That's it. It's a linear progression. There's no real decision to make here. And aside from the 25% GP boost that doesn't matter at all because your normal gauge is more than enough for every race, this mechanic doesn't interact with the gravity mechanic at all. You get absolutely 0 GP for changing gears. It's a far cry from the beautiful and seamless integration of riders leveling into the air mechanic. As one final cherry on top, Zero Gravity also neuters the trick system from riders, changing what was once a really unique and fun freestyle mechanic into a quick-time event. Yep, instead of charging your jump and performing your own freeform tricks by flipping in the air, you just press the A button on the ramp and the game automatically does a trick for you, based on how close to the end of the ramp you pressed the A button. Congratulations, Zero Gravity! You are now Bad Mario Kart Wii. Yippee! This is your primary way of refilling your GP between laps on the way to the gravity dive straight away, so it does at least still interact with the GP mechanic. But this change just sucked all of the dopamine straight out of the system. It's not the end of the world, but it's a really baffling decision that accomplishes nothing but taking fun and player agency out of the game. All of these mechanics come together to create the most 6 out of 10 racing game I have ever played. Like, it looks good, it sounds good, and it's completely functional. I never felt anything was broken or egregiously flawed, but I didn't feel much of anything else from this game either. Without the air mechanic holding everything together at its core, all of the mechanics feel disconnected from one another. The fact that your main abilities are only really meant for use in a few designated areas doesn't help either. It leaves large swaths of track feeling boring and uneventful, since your input is reduced to basically just steering. Zero Gravity is safe, generic, and boring, which makes it stand out like a sore thumb when its predecessor is so bold, unique, and exciting. There's nothing here that would ever make me want to sit down and play this game with my friends. It's just not a very fun racing game. Okay, even in a genre like a racing game though, it's not all about the multiplayer. Riders, for example, had mission mode and story mode, which was definitely enough to sink your teeth into for a little bit, with some solid rewards to boot. So how does Zero Gravity compare? Well, mission mode is about the same. I was actually about to write in the script how it doesn't have one, but then I double checked just to be sure, and found out they hid it in the story mode menu, which is really weird, but whatever. Just like in Riders, mission mode is a series of extremely repetitive missions to do on every track. It's monotonous and boring. And unlike in my Riders video, I didn't sit down and play through this whole mode because the rewards are a lot worse and I only have so much time on this godforsaken earth. There are no extra boards to collect, and as far as unlockable characters go, well, Mr. Monkey Ball is gone. II is absent from subsequent Sonic Riders games because he's currently helping with Jet the Hawk's presidential campaign as head of security. Instead, now you get Amigo and Billy Hatcher. I don't give a flying fuck about either of these characters, so yeah, I'm not playing this. Now you may be thinking, Soda Crab, given that you're the Monkey Ball guy, aren't you being a little biased here? Yes. Story mode is also exactly like in Riders, with a separate hero and Babylon story where they go through their own Grand Prix tracks. However, unlike in Riders, where the plot was a pretty bog-standard racing story and the characters were actually doing races in-universe, Zero Gravity makes the interesting decision of actually trying to have a narrative completely unrelated to any kind of racing, which doesn't really work. Look, it's fucking Sonic Riders. I'm not expecting a narrative masterpiece, and I'm not gonna sit here and act like the plot being bad is some kind of huge detractant, but this shit is weird, man. Now, in my Sonic Riders video, I kind of made fun of the phenomenon of people disliking the idea of Sonic on a hoverboard because he's already fast. Like, who cares? It's a racing game and it's fun. But here in Zero Gravity, the plot kind of unintentionally shines a spotlight on that critique and validates it. In Sonic Riders, Sonic, the fastest thing alive, is riding a hoverboard because he entered a hoverboard racing tournament. It's internally consistent. Sonic isn't out running these people on foot because that isn't the point. Complaining about that is like complaining that the biggest and strongest guy at a Super Smash Bros. Tournament doesn't just beat everyone up in real life to win. The whole point is that it's a Super Smash Bros. Competition. It doesn't matter that the big guy could just win in a real fight. Zero Gravity makes the mistake of completely recontextualizing the plot around, like, a real crisis event. Basically, a bunch of robots owned by Amazon or something go berserk all across the world. They're after these stone bracelet things that Sonic and friends find that allows them to manipulate gravity. Turns out, Eggman is actually the CEO of Amazon and is secretly behind the whole thing and wants to use the gravity bracelets and robots to make Eggman land or something. One of the robots goes berserk and turns into a black hole, and Sonic Gravity dives into it 5 times and the world is saved. The end. The whole time all of this is going on, though, Sonic is just inexplicably using his hoverboard to get around everywhere, using it to run away, using it to fight, using it for literally everything. It's bizarre, it's not really internally consistent. Sonic would be a lot more effective on foot, or with the Chaos Emeralds, or something, anything. By making the plot marginally more complicated, Zero Gravity has made itself make significantly less sense. And to cap all of this off, in the final cutscene, Tails just randomly says, "Wow, I can't believe the Babylonians are descendants of aliens!" After that was absolutely not at all set up by the plot, and everyone kind of just nods like, "Wow, yeah, Tails, that really is crazy, and yet that's a true statement we all believe." Like, what? That's like if the end of Breaking Bad Season 4 was like, "Jesse, I can't believe Gus Fring was an alien all along. Hey, yo, Mr. White did some crazy shit, yo, but I think you're supposed to say migrant now." Sonic Riders Zero Gravity, despite being a direct sequel, is a downgrade in just about every substantive area from the original Sonic Riders. While it may not be an absolute travesty of game design, which means it will always have its defenders that this video will no doubt piss off, it's still a textbook example of how not to follow up a game. Just about everything that made the first game special is in some way diminished here. But the saddest part of the story is that at this point, it wasn't hopeless. There was an opportunity here, an opportunity to bounce back better than ever in the third entry. Unfortunately for Zero Gravity, its legacy would not be a bump on the road to glory, but rather the first step out of its light, as just 2 years later, Free Riders would release to put the series to death for good. Full disclosure, I'm not going to make a Free Riders video. I really do not want to play it, and I don't have anything I particularly want to say about it. I think it speaks for itself just fine. I'll be spending my time on something more productive, helping to run the campaign for the Crustacean Party's nominee for president, the one and only Jet the Hawk. His election to the office of President of the United States is our only hope to see the Sonic Riders series brought back to its former glory. But we need your help. Jet the Hawk is currently polling extremely low in key swing states because of recent rumors regarding his misuse of the Chaos Emeralds, and new leaked information indicating that he may be an actual alien. By subscribing to the channel, you can stand with Jet, showing your commitment to the cause and proving that we, the people, will not be swayed by such blatant slander. In fact, he's about to give a speech to dispel some of these rumors and rally his base to get out and vote. Mr. the Hawk, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, there have recently been rumors flying around that I previously misused the Chaos Emeralds. It is with a heavy heart that I inform you that there is indeed a kernel of truth to these rumors. I am man enough to admit my own mistakes. However, upon using the Chaos Emeralds to raise Babylon Garden, I immediately returned them to the proper authorities, and turned myself in for car-bombing Sonic the Hedgehog in order to steal them.
Oh, damn it, I told him not to admit the Sonic thing.
I hope my platform and my actions have shown that I regret my mistakes, and I wish to atone by making this country a better place. As for the rumors...
Hey, Soda Crab, I know II is head of security, so it's not really my business, but is that guy up there one of our snipers? Sniper? We don't have any Mr. the Hawk, get down!